Well, brilliant, and thank you so much for coming this evening. This is an experimental kind of session, really.
Don't say that.
In Nepal, I would apologise at the beginning for the cock up this is going to be this evening. So I hope that it won't be. But so because I'm slightly in awe of Ian Whybrow is I had to write it all down. You've written more than 100 books. Translated into 27 languages, published in 28 countries, and you've been in the top 10 most borrowed books for, was it 20 years from public libraries?
There were 20 years, which I was.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't written any children's books, I should say, since I moved to Cambridge, which was in November 15. So I had to rely on on royalties now. Keep it going.
Yes, and of course, every time someone borrows a book from a library, the author makes the magnificent sum of 13p, which actually does add up to quite a lot if you've got as many books out as Ian has. So do keep borrowing books.
Yeah.
So I think your first book was in 1989. So we're kind of matched, aren't we? Because my first book was in 1990, so we're sort of even pegging a bit.
Yeah.
And I think, you're going to show us some books.
Well, I just bought this bag along in case I had it got a bag of things that I was carrying around. I was wondering, that was the first one I ever read. It's called Sniff Stories, but we're not really going to be doing children's books tonight. I might do actually. I've got a few pounds on that. So, that was Sniff Stories. Yeah.
So, after a tremendous career writing children's books, Ian has started writing poems. So, do you want to talk a bit about that?
First of all, I just want to say I owe a tremendous debt to libraries. I spent a lot of time in them over about 30 years. I was a teacher for a long time. And then I started writing. I've written all my life, and gradually started to write children's books. Only because I couldn't get any adult books published. So I wrote all sorts of stuff. But actually, writing poetry did get me into it a bit, because I had a group of friends who did all kinds of different things. We decided one day we would have a sort of salon. The architect would talk about his work, the property developer would talk about his work, somebody else was an interior designer would talk about hers. And they asked me if I would talk about poetry. Could I run a poetry class, which I did. They wrote wonderful stuff, actually. Once guided a bit, this little group of people who turned up wrote amazingly good poetry. And I thought, well, I better write some. And I read a couple of dozen things. Looked in the back of Writers and Artists Yearbook. Found an agent. I didn't know anything about it. I felt I ought to have an agent. And just sent these off. They all said, no unsolicited poetry. And that's so I sent this agency, A.D. Peters, a load of unsolicited poems. And I got a letter back from the very charming woman called Caroline Dornay. She said, look, if you want to I can't make any money at all out of poetry. So, but if you ever write anything that might make a bit of money for me, you may write back to me. So that's how I got my foot in the door, through poetry. Anyway, tonight I thought, I went and begged I went to Central Library and had a little chat with people. I said I wanted to talk about this charity that I'm writing. I'm doing this marathon, started in lockdown, in which I decided I'd write a poem a day and give the money to charity. But of course everybody hates poetry. It's not like running. You go off and run a marathon, people give you thousands of quid, but nobody gives any money at all for writing poetry. But I've kept going, and this is my 4th year of writing a poem a day. And I said, I'd like to talk to people about it, just to get them interested and maybe to raise a bit of money. I shan't press too hard tonight because I think you know money is required to run this excellent organisation. But then I thought, well, nobody will come. You know, I had a certain amount of children knew who I was, for one reason or another, but adults didn't know at all. So I thought, nobody will turn up. So we came up with this idea, which is a bit bogus, really, wasn't it?
It was really.
What's the title of this, of our conversation?
Laying ourselves bare.
We thought that would be a pun. Laying ourselves bare. We thought we'd talk about.
At the moment, I am.
We thought we would. We could perhaps talk about the various tricks of trying to get our audiences interested, and that if we could perhaps talk about a few rude things. But anyway, that's just to explain to you this was all entirely spurious reason for getting to listen to poetry. But come on, let's talk about something rude for a start.
Something rude. Well, I was phoned up in Kathmandu by a publisher saying, could I write a book with shit in the title?
Yes.
Which is an unusual phone call. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And we went back and forward for a while, and I kept on saying, what do you want me to write about? And they said, yes, very good, we're really looking forward to it. And it turned out to be a book of travellers' tips, which came out as Shitting Pretty in its first edition. But that title was a bit too subtle for the Americans, they didn't understand that. So they wanted to change it to How to Shit Around the World. Which, so there are copies here if you want to have a giggle. Quite good.
Did you give Trump a copy called How to Shit on the World?
Well, the publisher did say that their idea for the first the title was going to be How to Shit All Over the World, and I said we all think that. I didn't say this. I was thinking, well, we all think the Americans do already. So
have you sold the film rights yet?
Not yet.
It's a handy book, isn't it? It's very useful.
I hope it is. Yes, it's about diarrhea and avoiding it, and what to do when you've got it. Yeah. And there's lots of stories about toilets that you can't work out how to get in or get the light on, or what you do if you have a stalactite of excreta to.
Any questions?
So my friends call me the shit doctor. I don't know whether that's because I'm not a very good doctor or because I'm always talking about poo. So,
if you're writing for children, you have to do quite a lot of stuff about poo. One of my characters is this little guy called Little Wolf, and I had an idea. I went to the library where I was living in Harrow and said, this was ages ago, and said, have you got any sort of books have you got about wolves? And they said, well, come back this week, we'll let you know. And they said, well, not many, there's not much stuff. So I thought I'd write a book about an epistolary novel about a small wolf whose mum and dad don't think he's quite bad enough. So they send him off to a threatening forest to learn the 9 rules of badness from his Uncle Big Man. And that it did very well after lots and lots of attempts at getting it right. And then a spin-off from it was writing this. Little Wolf can't spell, or so this is called a handy book of peons. And he wrote letters home to his mum and dad moaning about things in general. But I was just thinking of, this is the kind of level that you have to sometimes find. But Little Wolf allowed me to get away with this because he's a wolf after all. This is called, his little brother is called Smelly Breath. And this is called Smells in the Bathroom. Smells in the bathroom, getting undressed. This is the bit that he liked best. Eating all the toothpaste, squeezing the shampoo, collecting all the bath toys, and dropping them down the loo. So, lots of stuff like that. There's sort of various tips for bringing up small babies of one kind or another. And this is called tip 4, babies are quite dangerous. Babies are quite dangerous. This is what they do. wah wah, burp, sick puddle, poo. If you give them piggybacks or too much rabbit stew, remember, wah wah, burp, sick puddle, poo. So there we are. So at that, there was a certain amount of stuff at that level, I'm afraid.
Excellent.
But you've done some very serious things as well, so let's move on to those. I listened to a book that I haven't actually got a copy of this, but I listened to this book when I knew that Jane and I were going to be, that she was a writer in residence here, and it's called A Glimpse of the Eternal Snows. And I listened to it travelling up and down the motorway to Herefordshire, and she has done an audible recording of it, which is so wonderfully moving. And I have to say, I haven't told you this, but I think you are probably. There's something very poetic about the language that you use, the natural. You introduce us to the landscape, the animals, the birds in particular, you seem drawn to. And there's something beautiful about your descriptions, I think. But it promises to be a very sad book, because, am I allowed to tell a little bit about it?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if somebody may know this, but when Simon and Jane had one child, and they had another child, a boy called David, and he was dreadfully disabled. Am I allowed to use that word? When he was born, it was clear right at the beginning that he didn't have much chance of living. And he had a cleft palate, he had a hole in his heart, he had gallstones, all kinds of things wrong with him. And this was in, James was a GP working in Cambridge, and she had a child in Admiral's. That's fascinating that they were doing their very best for her, but the very best was so stiflingly dreadful and painful for her, in the sense that the child was constantly being, they'd say, right, we'll do his cleft lip. And she was thinking, oh, I don't really want them to do that now. Can't we wait until a little bit later? No, we know, we're going to do that now. We'll do a lovely job, don't worry about the stitching, we'll do that. And they would do that. And then they'd start poking him about, and they'd start thinking about when they were going to fix the holes in his heart, and all sorts of things. So he had to have, he was on a drip, he had to have the most appalling, you tried tasting it, I remember.
Yeah, tasted like lard.
Horrible food.
Powder. Yeah.
And he had to have, and he was in distress all the time, and it was so machine. And Simon was in deepest Nepal at the time, running up as a water engineer, trying to fix up all kinds of problems with the water in Nepal. Anyway, the story sounds as if it's going to be awful, because, this is not a spoiler, the baby does die. But what happens is that Jane decided, didn't really want to stay, and just have him go through a lot of pain and have a lot of things done to him, have his life one constant misery after another. So she said, right, well, thank you very much, but I'm going to Nepal, and I'm going to Simon, to join Simon. And she took the child really to get him a life. Is that right?
Exactly.
And, the first thing they did was go on a huge trek up the mountain somewhere. And then they finished up on an island in the middle of the
largest tributary of the Ganges.
Very remote, as I understand, the
15
tributary of
hours
the
drive
Ganges.
from
They finished up on this island with no running water, no lights, no nothing. A little boy and a baby. And it's really a story of the way they coped, the way they learned to cope, and they were supported
by the
by the local community. And it's a tremendously inspiriting, encouraging book. And I thought it was beautiful. So,
Thank you so much.
if you don't mind, if you can't bring yourself to read about pyramids of shit. Read this because it's just so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
I
Really
heartily
review.
endorse.
You, pardon?
I heartily endorse that. It really is very.
You recommend it too,
Very
isn't it?
inspiring.
It is. It's not at all miserable.
No.
You can say something.
I just said I endorse it.
You? Oh gosh! So you've got some fans here.
Yeah.
But you know, there should be more.
Yes, so
No, but tell us about you've written another one.
follow up. So
which is-
yeah, Jane was just asking if it, so I did record it for Audible and recorded a lot of Nepali bird songs as well to bookend each chapter. So you get quite a lot. Oh, and there's some awful wedding music in the middle of it. But that
Bit of
gave me a
jingle,
headache.
jingle, jingle,
Yes.
jingle. Yes.
Very loud wedding music and things like that. So it's me for my sins. But yes, when I got that published in 2007 by an Australian publisher initially, and then I thought it'd be quite interesting to try and write a sequel, because living on our island in the middle of nowhere, I was surrounded by all the castes, and I could see a lot of injustice. Our nearest neighbours were traditional or hereditary prostitutes. So, like me, they were outcasts. So I was one of them, really. They were very polite and very nice to me. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to try and write a novel getting inside the heads of the illiterate low caste women. So I invented another memsahib that went to the island after we were there, and all the people were sort of saying, well, we're really looking forward to seeing the next memsahib. It was such a laugh watching what the first one got up to, because she was so stupid, really. And so I've written it from the point of view of an illiterate, low caste woman, a 40-something Brit who's gone through a bit of a bad patch, and a teenager, and it was really fun to write, actually, because I was at the time going through a bit of a rough patch in general practice. The Primary Care Trust was trying to close us down, and we had this absolute pig of a practice manager. He was a submariner, and I don't know how he survived. I think I would have killed him if I'd been in that submarine with him. He made me cry at work, which is very unusual. I don't usually cry. So I was thinking about him when I was writing about the nasty high caste men who were groping my low caste friends. And I killed him horribly. It was so satisfying.
So it's getting an angle up, really. It isn't a question. You don't have to necessarily write that. What's the word? The lowest common denominator is not necessary. You could, if you find an angle on things, that's what makes them interesting.
Yes, I think so.
It's interesting she went from one caste system at Ambrose, where you've got this extraordinary power invested in the surgeons and right down to the nurses and the swabbers out. And you had to say you went to Nepal, where this exists, where people actually perhaps more willingly accept their status.
Yes, you can't change your caste.
You're lumbered with it, so
The only
you might
way
as
you
well
can
do
change
it.
it is by dying and
Do
being
you think people are
reincarnated.
happier because of that?
I don't think poor people who are are happy anywhere, really.
No.
They're more accepting. They're more. I think Nepalis are very good at living from day to day, a bit like people with terminal cancer and people who are alcoholics. They will grab joy when it's presented to them, and they won't be thinking about, if I do this next year, I won't be able to do this. They just they're good at partying, but
Very fatalistic.
But really good at just accepting stuff as it is. So that was what was really good about little David being there, because they didn't sort of shy away from the fact he was obviously disabled. They said, "Oh, look at his lovely hair and his lovely skin and his lovely
And what
smile."
a beautiful job they've done
Yes,
with the
that's
smile.
right.
Yeah,
How did they do
they're
that?
very impressive.
Yeah, so that was really heartening. Whereas in Britain, if you're walking around Cambridge with an obviously abnormal child, people will look and think, oh flip, it's an abnormal child, what do I say? And they won't actually come and say, you've got a beautiful baby, which is what any new mum wants.
But they did say to you, why didn't he sit up? Yes. And you would have to explain that, he can't sit up. That is, well, you should be able to sit up. But, you could talk to them actually without, it wasn't a criticism of the baby,
no.
It was a criticism of you.
Well, but also, white people are weird, so maybe babies don't sit up as a sort of normal thing, that they probably don't develop at the same rate.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know there was a bit in it where Jane decides she wants to leave a little bit of a mark, but she doesn't want to sort of set up a clinic where, when she goes, it will just sort of close down. So she decided to try to encourage a committee to, what was the exact, it was quite simple thing.
Yes, I wanted them to
self-help.
To roll out some health information about what you do if you get bitten by a dog because of sort of rabies. And if you clean out a wound, scrub it out and put some alcohol in it, and they were good at making alcohol, they could actually save lives. And I couldn't get them to engage.
It's so frustrating that you came to a point where they were promised a grant for, was it to lay on fresh water or something?
That's right, yes.
And all they had to do, this committee, who would only meet about every 4 weeks or something, all they had to do, she put the thing, she'd filled in all the forms, put it in an envelope with a stamp on it, and all they had to do was post it.
Sign it.
Never posted it.
Yeah, signed it and posted it. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was just too much. It would have shaken things up, maybe, too much.
I don't know. I think that they thought a Western doctor would give them political points, and when I was going to set up a fancy clinic that would make them politically get on, then they weren't really
It was riveting. All this stuff about, what you go to the doctor for. The doctor would give you 9 drugs or something.
At least
give you an injection, ideally, for whatever you had.
If not 2.
Give you a couple of injections, and then give you loads of different, and of course you would have to buy the pharmaceuticals, so that's how they made their money.
Yeah.
And that was quite a difficult thing to break through too.
Yeah,
so
really
fascinating insight into that. But how lovely the community was, wasn't it?
Fantastic. Yeah, really good.
No, it's a great book.